Namaste, yoga mamas and mamas to be. This is a final session on miscarriage support, and once again I'm so sorry if you need this, and I really wish that it wasn't happening to you. I really do. But if you do need this support, then I hope what I have to say helps. I ended up with 4 miscarriages in a row before I had Caitlin, my 4th and final child, live birth child. And I guess my reflections now are mainly aimed at helping you to decide, I suppose, on your journey and how you're going to feel about it and what you would like to do in the event of maybe never finding answers, or maybe deciding to go a different way other than another pregnancy. And I'll start with my story in case it helps you. So my first loss, doctors, as usual, they write these things off as probably a bad spin of the genetic wheel, and the baby could never have survived, so the body got rid of it. And it sounds really harsh and really terrible, but I suppose that in a way it's a protective mechanism so that our body doesn't invest everything into developing a baby that is not compatible with life. And so as harsh as it is a way to look at it that maybe could bring some solace and maybe some hope, because if it is a defect in the embryo, then that doesn't mean that it's going to happen again, particularly if you are generally young, fit and healthy, or otherwise have been checked out as being okay and maybe having good egg reserves, or being able to maybe use some strategic supplementation to help boost your, not just your fertility, but your egg quality. And you can look into preconception care for that. Some naturopaths might do it. You could Google, and there's some things on the Royal College of General Practitioners, I think, about things you can do. And I had an obstetrician in the end who recommended a few things like coenzyme Q10, and I can't remember if he recommended it or a naturopath, but they mentioned NAC to me. So you could look into those, talk to your doctor about whether they're suitable for your scenario, and that may help future egg quality. You could look into male health as well for the male partner, because sometimes boosting sperm quality in the same sort of time as eggs, it's usually 3 or 4 months that you're looking at using supplementation for, to try to maximize the quality of both egg and sperm and hopefully minimize the risk of embryos that are not compatible with life. However, that's kind of digressing and an aside. The second miscarriage, I started pushing for answers, because to me 2 in a row after having 3 healthy children was quite abnormal, and I was only in my early 30s still and had no other real reason to think that I should miscarry twice in a row. The doctors will still try to tell you that even 2 in a row is probably still a bad spin of the genetic wheel, but they are more and more open to investigating after 2. The guidelines used to be to investigate after 3 consecutive miscarriages, but it is really emotionally difficult for women especially, but both partners, to process miscarriage, and they are starting to see that and starting to come on board with earlier investigations. So you can speak to your GP earlier about those options, or find an obstetrician who might help you. So after that second loss, I saw an integrative GP who was very helpful. He talked a lot about maternal depletion, and he tested me quite thoroughly and got me on a range of supplements and referred me to a hematologist and immunologist. So same person, both specialties. She tested me for a range of blood disorders, and I might find those separately and try to list all the testing regime that I had, in the hope that it helps you to make sure that you're being tested as rigorously as possible, because you might as well get it all done in one go if possible. But anyway, she tested me as rigorously as she could in her specialty fields and found nothing at all. She said, look, it doesn't really hurt to go on aspirin as a blood thinner. It's actually just a low dose aspirin. I can't remember the exact dosage. I think it was either 100 or 125 milligrams once a day, but you could once again talk to your doctor about that. And sometimes that just helps if there's maybe a little immune blip going on, that maybe your body is rejecting the embryo for some reason, then that's sort of their baseline level. But I found out later that there are even more interventions that they can do for that. But this was what I had going into the third pregnancy after 2 losses. So she also suggested progesterone supplementation. There's not a lot of evidence that it helps much. If the body is going to miscarry, then it's probably going to miscarry regardless of the keeping up of progesterone. And the pessaries are quite expensive, but she said by all means you can do it. It's quite a high dose, and so I did that. I did aspirin and progesterone going into the next pregnancy, and I had a missed miscarriage. This was the latest one of all at 10 weeks, or I should have been 10 weeks, but the baby had died the week before when we found out at the scan. And I was crushed, devastated, wondering what on earth I could have done better or differently, or who I should have talked to who would have known more and could have found an actual cause before this happened again. Now, that embryo was tested successfully. The second embryo was also tested for genetic defects, and they could not find enough viable DNA, I guess, to run the test, so it was inconclusive. The third one actually did have a chromosomal abnormality called XXX, I believe, where it had a whole extra set of chromosomes and would never have been compatible with life. So in a way, that was a relief, but also discouraging, because I really wanted doctors to look into reasons that I might be losing babies, not have their theory of bad spin of the genetic wheel sort of reinforced. But I found an obstetrician who would look at those results with me, and he also did a hysteroscopy to check for things inside my uterus that might be a problem, and he still didn't find anything there. He said I could just go ahead with another pregnancy in the hope that somehow I had bad enough luck to have 3 in a row that were abnormal. But he tended to agree with me that it would, even with that third one having an actual chromosomal abnormality, it just didn't look like a normal pattern. So I ended up being referred on to another obstetrician who did some testing. The only testing that I hadn't already had done was both partner DNA testing to check for incompatibilities between our 2 sets of DNA. And that sounded weird after 3 live children. Why would we expect to have that sort of incompatibility? And it is a controversial diagnosis, but we did have a partial mismatch. I believe it's called the DQ gene. And that can predispose women to having their immune system primed against the embryo so that they then lose subsequent pregnancies. So I could have been getting more and more primed against these embryos the more children I had, and that sounded like a viable explanation. And so I proceeded on to an immunosuppressive regime with a lot of medications that did have side effects and were very expensive, but I was not prepared to go into another pregnancy without doing something different. And we included his recommendation for me basically being vaccinated, I guess, for want of a better word, against my husband's white blood cells. So they would draw blood from him, they would spin it down, they would pull out white blood cells, and they would inject them into my skin. and it has a name that escapes me right now, but once again, I'll write it all up into a separate blog post so that you can follow along step by step if ever you need to, and I sincerely hope you don't, but you could follow along with my pathway, because I think I've had the most rigorous testing available in Australia currently, and maybe it just helps to guide your own treatment plan. So the next pregnancy, I am so thankful and so pleased to be able to say that I did get a baby, and she is wonderful, and she is 16 months old now. And I guess just to try to wrap that up, I'm grateful that I got her, and I feel like she's the missing piece of our family, and she helps me a lot. But even if I had made the decision to stop trying for pregnancies, I then would have needed some other way, I guess, of wrapping my head around and coming to terms with that. And I suppose yoga, meditation, other forms of exercise, like I used to run, and I'm not a runner, but I used to just try to run it off and feel better. And sometimes that helped and sometimes not, and the grieving process takes as long as it takes, and I do have other videos talking through ideas on the actual grieving process. But in terms of where to stop, I guess each woman is different and will make a decision based on what is right for her and her family. And I feel like you will know where your cutoff is, where your point of going, this is not right for me in my life, and maybe you will make plans for another option like fostering or adoption, or maybe you will decide not to have a family or not to have an extra family member. Anything you choose that feels right in your heart and which you can come to terms with, I think is really all we can ask for. Life keeps moving whether we want it to or not, and at some point we have to make a decision to either move forward or to let go and to find or form a new dream. And I hope that in some way, learning my story and my ways of coping and my ways of investigating and treating and coming to terms with and family planning, I suppose, I hope something in there resonates and helps you. And I am always happy for you to reach out and talk to me more if you feel that it will help. And I always will recommend one-on-one care with a psychologist, particularly one trained with they're all mental health trained, maternal mental health, because they are that much more specific and that much more dialed into the specific issue that you have, and they can be of really great benefit. So I really wish you all the very best for your future plans and for whatever path you take from here. And I just hope that whatever decision you end up making, whatever path you go down next, that you get what you need and find love and joy and connection in your life, no matter what. Namaste.